all of our interactions with the technology around us, it won't be so much about tapping on this. It will be voice driven, and it will be a shift from static to interactive across all of the touch points. I think you'll see, people have been experimenting with Alexas in the home and things like this over time, but I think it's truly going to happen and enabled by LLMs, enabled by low latency interactions, and enabled by the hardware to make sure that it's the true standard for voice interaction.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Code and Connor podcast. My name is Connor Deeks, CEO of CodeStrap, and I'm joined, as always, with the original CodeStrap himself and CTO, Dorian Smiley. We're going to be bringing you guys the latest and greatest around Palantir, the tech, the company, the community. We'll also be discussing insights on other companies, things happening in the world of AI, of data, of consulting, of investing, and any other meaningful topic that requires attention. The focus of today's episode is the voice of AI. We're joined today by Jack Smith. Jack leads global channel partnerships and strategic alliances at ElevenLabs. Previously, he was the employee experience and consumer bank operations tech strategy lead at JPMorgan Chase. There, he was overseeing technology initiatives and leading engagement with the tech ecosystem. Jack, welcome to Code and Connor.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
All right, so first topic on the docket is all about ElevenLabs. So in light of your all's recent enterprise partnerships, a few that were announced were with Square and Masterclass. How are you guys envisioning voice-first AI agents evolving in enterprise?
Fundamentally, at ElevenLabs, we see ourselves becoming the voice of technology and fundamentally changing the nature of the communication between humans and technology. Now, in practice, voice has been seen as an isolated channel in many of these enterprise situations of dealing with customers. I think what we're going to start to see over time is this evolution of voice as the interface across all of the touch points with the consumer. And I think we're seeing that in the customer service space. It's that evolution from frustration to resolution when dealing with the customer, right? Rather than seeing the call center channel, for example, as a deflection and a cost center, it's becoming more of an action taking that we can actually do on behalf of the customer here now. And that's, I think, the shift we're starting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, there was the push to get to low cost for some of these interactions, particularly with consumers and maybe customer service. And what everyone really just wanted, and what people still do with like call trees, is just to try and get to a human interaction. If you all can provide that seamlessly such that you still have a human-like experience, but maintain that low cost capability, that's a huge win, not just for customer service, but for a lot of interactions across enterprise. You could take ticket ops and ServiceNow, and those interactions trying to get to like an IT partner is incredibly painful. If you can get it back to be more human experiential, that'll be a major win. Again, while still maintaining the low cost aspect and the project management control of that. But I think you're right in that if we can get back to more human interaction, even if that is just with voice or voice first AI agents, we're going to see a massive boost in good experience happening, and it'll probably lead to even lower cost across the organization because we can get rid of a lot of these tools and painful experiences that kind of plague us today.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We've all done it. We've all pressed one and tried to get to the human, and shouting down the line. And the other side of that coin is getting to the human takes time. Whenever I'm in front of an audience, I'll often say put your hand up if you like hold time. No one likes hold time. We want to be able to get to that human-like experience fast. We live in an economy now where people expect instant resolution and instant gratification, right? People expect responses now and answers now. They don't want to wait around. So, we think that this type of technology, these voice agents that can actually take action, they scale infinitely at a lower cost right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the enterprise price for these things to really uplift the experience.
One of the interesting things you mentioned in there is like the pound rage or like the click one
Yeah.
rage, when you're on the phone, you're trying to get to that human on the other side. And I think that really underscores the friction that people have with technology generally, and that I think that exists not just in the call center context, but also in the like enterprise software context. And traditionally what's been hard is it's been hard to express human intention through a set of if then else statements. Like it's very difficult to code all of those pathways in this sort of very rigid structure. And so you get this half-baked experience, and people are just like, just get me to the person so I can actually explain what I want and what I'm trying to do. The interesting thing about LLMs is not only in a call center perspective is that like a 10 times better experience, because now the model can make plans and reason about what you need and gather information, determine what kind of a call this is, et cetera, et cetera. But you can actually take those same lessons and apply it to enterprise software where some of these same problems exist. There's huge friction points in like using Salesforce and using the ERP system and using like 15 other things you have to go through every day in the Office suite, the Microsoft Office suite to do your job. It'd be great, like if we could also remove the friction around those technology assets. So I'm curious, like, are you guys thinking about language interfaces for enterprise software in addition to not just the consumer-facing call center applications, but like the actual back office workforce?
Oh, absolutely. The way I like to think about the use cases, because fundamentally we have a horizontal developer first platform, right? That's what it is. And the use cases I tend to bucket as either kind of internal facing, outbound, or inbound, right? And it's that first bucket of internal facing where I think there's a lot of opportunity in the space you're talking about. And that's embedding these agents into the flow of work and into the workflows themselves. Where I'm seeing this happen in practice is things like employee coaches that you can actually embed onto an e-learning platform, right? So rather than clicking around and navigating around Oracle HCM or whatever it may be, you can converse with the content. But I think, we're going to see a lot of opportunity for these types of action-oriented, human-like agents that can be embedded directly into the flow of work. You know, the voice of technology is exactly what it does. It's what it says on the tin, right? That's what we aim to be. We aim to be that interface layer, whatever you're trying to do. Fundamentally, I don't think in a few years' time we'll be tapping around on here or typing commands in. I think we'll be talking. And I think you're starting to see that in some of the hardware investments that companies are starting to make. And I think you'll start to see that increasingly in the software investments as well.
Yeah,
Um,
we gave a presentation a few weeks ago at a conference called Future Ops where we talked exactly about this, where a system of language is far more natural for us humans who speak in language than all the technology components that we put a lot of money and time into, like making seamless and a good experience. But it would obviously be better if it was all based on language. If I want a report that gives me some level of insight, I'd rather just ask the question and get the right answer in a primitive that can communicate that information to me quickly. So, still having charts or whatever is necessary to get that information to me quickly. But I'd rather have it through a conversation, which is far more natural, but also quicker than having to build all these applications or dashboards and memorizing all of them. It's just a way better experience, far more natural. It's a return to human that I struggle to find anyone that is really pushing back against that. The great example is obviously Jarvis with Iron Man. That's what we all want. I mean, no one doesn't want a Jarvis for every single business function. The question is, how do we get there? I think ElevenLabs is on the forefront of giving us the voice capability to actually enable that, whether that's in a workflow in customer service or whether that's something in supply chain or some back office function.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because people feel comfortable using their voices and they always have done, right? Typing is a fairly new thing for humans to have adopted. We've used voice for 300,000 years, right? Homo sapiens, 300,000 years ago, knowledge and stories passed down for going on 70,000 years now. Right up to today, where, by the way, 128 trillion words are spoken every single day, right? It comes naturally to us. And so I think you find that once you provide the experience driven through voice, it comes naturally to people. It's the most natural interface.
Dorian, how do we get there? If you could speak on some of the wrapping of the global API economy, that would be cool, and that would be a good then transition into Jack. We can talk about the enhancements to the agents platform after that.
Yeah. So like, or one of the theories to into that like point about like reducing friction and people just, using language can more naturally communicate the ideas that they have. And you remove this friction point of like a keyboard, or you remove the friction point of this GUI I have to go fill out a form for, right? What's interesting, what tool calling showed us with agents is that agents can actually get pretty good at both planning how to, tackle users' requests through a series of tool calls, how to synthesize those outputs and perform complex tasks, right? By chaining these things together. Now, there needs to be a lot of engineering around that process. We actually built quite a bit of engineering to go from this like planning to tool execution to synthesizing outputs onto more tool execution. But what we're finding is you don't need a GUI, right, anymore. I don't need a human to go into a GUI or an AI to use a GUI if it can figure out how to execute effectively tool calling correctly and reduce the problem to get the parameters I need from the human to call the tools, synthesize the outputs, have human review outputs, execute plan. These kind of feedback loops or these kind of process loops, they're everywhere in enterprise. Basically, every job function in enterprise involves this process of take information from email, take information from PDF, take information from meeting notes, put into system of record A, system of record B, system of record C, by using some graphical user interface, maybe add some insights along the way, and then hit submit. There's a huge amount of work that is just this. And if you could take those same people and get them out of all those friction points with the technology they use and just let them speak these workflows, right? And actually communicate this information and give the appropriate context to the agents such that they don't have to enter information that's already recorded in a document or already recorded in an email. The models can extract those pieces for them, which are the kinds of experiences we built already with ElevenLabs. What's funny is I'm finding email, I actually like email again. I used to hate email, but now I love it because it's like the primary place I'm giving models context for a lot of the workflows that we're running on top of ElevenLabs agents. And so this ability to then move from having to take all the unstructured data, structure it and put it in a form, or structure it and have a human kind of marshal it into some database somewhere to reduce that to a conversation. Well, everyone starts having less stress, in my opinion. Like my day's less stressful. Like I'm actually having a better interaction, and I can do more work because I'm not flipping between screens and like losing context over what I was doing over here and then trying to get this other piece of unstructured data out of a PDF somewhere. If all of that pain also goes away, I'm way less stressed and way more productive. So I think like the challenge is the engineering around the system, right? We have to be able to give these agents and these voice models the appropriate information and context, provide the security and boundaries around that. And then also the governance around it. So like you guys have done a great job in recording message history. I think there's a lot of innovation that could be done on that side as well. Like how do we provide the evidence generation and audit trails in a more kind of seamless way for all these things? Once that engineering around that system is complete, there's kind of no limit to what you can build. And eventually what this evolves into is a natural language interface for every piece of software you use, right? If we can pull this context or engineering off.
You're absolutely right, because one of the reasons why we started out making AI models, and now we have platforms that we deliver on top of those platforms, right? And one of them is what we call our agents platform. And the fundamental reason that we created that was we realized that when you speak about the design of the system, people were just taking a text to speech, a speech to text, an LLM in the middle, and calling that a voice agent, which fundamentally misses so much of the complexity that actually comes into a system like this, right? Things like voice activity detection, right? Knowing when to actually speak. Things like turn taking. Things like automatic language switching. And then that's just the conversation piece. If you then add in the tools, if you add in the knowledge base, if you add in the voice controllability, all of these other pieces, there's so much complexity that stitching together various systems and kind of hoping it works, which is never really going to work at that low latency human-like nature, right? So that's why we did what we did, to give this kind of system that enables you to, build whatever flow it may be to whatever requirements you need to do, and give you the guardrails and the toolkit in order to do that in a way that you can actually monitor it, observe it, and deploy it in production rather than using it as an experiment.
One thing I really appreciate is the DevEx in there. Like, so I use the React SDK for ElevenLabs. DevEx is awesome. One of the coolest features in there is client-side tool calling. So like when the model invokes the tool, It's invoking it inside my React application, so I can set like breakpoints and debug this thing. But more importantly, I can actually improve the flow. So like a lot of what we're doing now is like these models can't perform tasks instantly. Sometimes it takes a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to perform a task for an end user. And so a lot of what we're doing now is queuing tasks. So like I could hit the model with 5 or 6 different tasks that I want it to do, even while it's currently working on another one. And because we have this robust SDK and client-side tool calling, we were able to effectively build that experience really quickly where like task 1 comes in, we pop it in a queue, we wait for that thing to finish. While that's running, you can still ask for additional work to be done. And so we're able to build up this like kind of way more now, almost like you were talking to a human. He's now like taking notes as like, what do I need to do next? And okay. And when that's done, I can come back with the results of that. And one of the interesting things is you can also send the model like these context updates that don't affect the conversation flow, but give the model the results of a task or give the model new information that's coming back as the task is being performed. And the model can actually like inject and read that stuff back, right? So it's like the results of the task then become a conversation point as well. So like as you're giving the model these context updates that include the results of work being done, I can now have a conversation with the model. One of the most areas where we use that the most is in like research reports. I'll task a model like going out and building a research report on a topic I found that day. But then I can actually converse with the ElevenLabs agent on the report when it comes back, in addition to reading like the summary that gets spit out. So like, I think on the DevEx side, you guys have really nailed it, especially with the whole client-side tool calling, contextual updates, the ability to do things around the model as the conversation is taking place, such that the model can now more effectively communicate with the human about the key points of information or a lot of these things. So I would say like, it's one thing to be able to have the tech. It's another for developers to be able to use it effectively, and reducing it to like a set of simple things that are kind of opinionated about how you should build the experience, but not so opinionated that the developers are going to be arraigned to be creative. I think you guys have definitely.
Yeah. Those are asynchronous tool calls you referred to, right? There's something
Exactly.
we added in fairly recently, and they really do go quite a way to making the conversation feel more natural. Because it is that notion of like if you're a human agent, sat there in a contact center, and the application you're using to get information about the user is taking some time, it's freezing. You will say to the person, is there anything else I can help you with while we're waiting? But now we can do that in an agentic flow, bring the information back and re-interject at the right moment in the flow. But it's those little things, like it sounds like such a silly one, but one of the ones that we introduced recently that people love is tool call sounds, right? So we can do keyboard clicking or something like that when there is a tool call executing, and it's little adjustments. And another one that we're working on is background noise and make it sound like it's because while it's still important for us to declare it's an agent and make sure that the person's aware. Fundamentally, making it feel like it's an experience they're used to makes it more natural, and they feel more engaged with it, right? So they're the little things that we're starting to do that really make it feel like a true conversation.
Well, there's a lot more. I'll bring up one of your guys' recent Business Wire announcements coming off the summit, but a lot of new product features being announced. By the way, Dorian saying that he's happy with the developer experience. I've heard that twice from him. One with Palantir years ago, and like with OneLog. Kudos to you guys on that. But you guys are adding a lot of capabilities. The nuance that you just mentioned, but also some major enhancements around integrations, around version control, the asynchronous features, fantastic. What it feels like is you guys are barreling towards being a competitive AI platform with others in the arena, namely maybe Palantir, Foundry, AIP, and things that Databricks are doing. Is that the intent here, is to fully become a platform where all agentic capability, voice-led, is built, maintained, and then operationalized in like an ElevenLabs platform, the agents platform?
Yeah, I'd say that the vision fundamentally is to be that conversational agentic layer, right? Across voice, across chat, whatever it is. And, a lot of the infrastructure we're putting in around the agents platform helps us get there. Things like testing, things like version control, help you build, maintain, and deploy these production grade conversational agents at scale in the enterprise, right? The developer experience is core to that because it is fundamentally at its core a developer platform. That's where we started out, and it's to our advantage because we're one of these companies that fairly uniquely blends the kind of self-serve, credit card online model with the sales-led enterprise model. And I think that's actually a benefit because the two things actually come together and help reinforce each other, because we've got the community, the Discord, all of that, which is very invested in the platform and using it for their personal projects. And the feedback loop we get from those users who are using the platform and pushing it to its limits, and the SDKs and the rest of it are a testament to that, are then appreciated by the enterprises, because large banks have got hundreds of thousands of employees sometimes, and tens of thousands of those may even be developers. And so having that, being able to provide that kind of developer ecosystem where you can actually go and build, and you can build the agents on our platform, is appreciated by some of these organizations. So it all comes together, in my opinion.
One of the features that jumped off, a couple of them that jumped off the page to me were like this agent testing and simulations, and then evaluations. One of the things that is still kind of taking off, like among the AI labs, one of the things that has really advanced that made progress over the last year or so is RL, or reinforcement learning. It's like having the feedback loops so that you can have a reward model that can essentially do the RL feedback with through the training process. To set that up effectively is hard. Like, there's all this engineering we have to put around actually being able to create these cases that can be evaluated, right? Because it can't be like some subjective thing which is maybe right or maybe wrong. So like one of the things that some companies have done is like set up a success criteria that might be a system mutation. Like a record should have been added in Salesforce with the following, attributes, or some other system mutation for another database. That's the outcome you're looking for as part of a test or a reward for the simulation that you're going to run. But that's been really hard to set up. Like, it's not been easy, and you kind of need a lot of specialized tooling. If you can reduce the process of building successful RL loops and doing this training process to something that the average developer could do, I think that's $1 billion business by itself. Because one of the interesting things that can happen here is now every enterprise job function could have these RL loops set up, and you could effectively fine-tune models for specific roles in an enterprise, which I think we actually have to get to. I think you're going to map many small language models, many agents onto the job functions that currently exist in an organization, but you can't do it with a general purpose, trillion parameter model. It's actually going to be better done with smaller models that are tuned to these specific areas. So I'm wondering, with both the simulations and the evaluations, do you see this space of like reducing training to something that the average dev could do, and this idea that then you can then map this on to many, 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 many job functions and organizations to specialize agents that help people kind of perform their day-to-day job functions? Is that something you would possibly envision ElevenLabs wanting to provide in the future, or is you more focused on, I don't know, more general purpose use cases?
No, look, I think where we're focused, and I think where the Nirvana state will be these conversational agents that learn from the failures, learn from the successes, and iterate and develop with some human in the loop as part of that. We're not there yet. We have robust testing and simulations at the moment, but there is still very much that human element of understanding what's gone wrong and how I can configure the agent to overcome that. I think one of the ways that we're really starting to see benefit from that is one of our new features of essentially branch testing, where you can roll out enhancements to a small subset of users and iterate on it fast through A/B testing. We still do have that element of understanding what's gone wrong or could be improved and bringing that in. But I think you're right, having that closed loop cycle of the agent learning from the failures autonomously with some approval step improving, that's where I think we'll see some investments in the future.
Sounds like, you guys are obviously addressing user experience. Developer experience seems to be so far a win, being developer focused as a company. What we're seeing in the ecosystem of companies trying to adopt AI is an ability to build a lot of flashy pilots, but not really scale into production. If you could touch on like what ElevenLabs is seeing, how you guys are helping companies adopt these things and get out of pilot hell, that'd be great to hear, particularly for our audience's sake.
Yeah. I think there's things we're seeing specifically as relates to conversational agents in production, but I think some of that is broadly applicable across any of the AI experiments, right? I think what we're seeing in conversational agents is, customers are abandoning brands and experiences if the conversations feel unnatural. Now, if I distill that, what does that actually mean? It's rigid and inflexible robotic interactions. What's really burned people with some of these conversational AI experiments over time is things that don't flow or don't feel natural or feel like you're actually engaging on that level. So making sure that there is flexibility built into the system is something that I think we're starting to see. Uh, you know, Another piece we're seeing is the complexity of the integrations and how you manage that, right? Because fragmented integrations and this sprawl of tool calls creates technical debt, right? And that's why we see a lot of these POCs failing before reaching production. And then the other piece is the controllability and the observability, right? You need to have a sense of what's actually happening in these agents, like what they're doing, what the outputs are, what the evaluation criteria is saying, what the test results are, and then continuously improve and iterate based upon that. So I think those three things really come together, and that's why we've been focusing on building in these robust evaluation and testing capabilities so you actually know what's happening and so that you can have a data-driven approach to actually building these things and scaling them out across the enterprise. Because you can't just spray and pray and expand this thing across without having any sense of what they're actually doing in production.
Yeah. I interacted with the CTO of Nike of all things, LinkedIn. They had released their Nike application, which was supposed to be, now this was a text-based exchange, not voice. The hope would be, I'm assuming, that it gets to voice at some point. But it was super rigid. Like, I asked a question, I wanted to get to something like, give me some black shirts and black shoes that I might be interested in. And it was just like just another decision tree, like locking me into like what type of shoes, new releases. It didn't feel human experiential at all. And then it was outright wrong. And so I immediately noticed like, did they have explainability, observability, auditability of this transaction? And then when I would leave the experience and come back, it's totally gone. Which is odd, because if you're in a customer funnel, you don't want to lose your place. Like, we've solved that issue with carts and online shopping experiences already. It feels like we're kind of experimenting live with a lot of these things without the three requisite tools or capabilities you mentioned, which doesn't feel natural and didn't give me the warm and fuzzies that I wanted to use that experience. So I think we have a ways to go with a lot of enterprises. I think a lot of people are stuck in pilot and kind of just saying, well, I guess we can't get any better, so let's just put this out in the wild and see what happens. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, particularly around what you just said, Jack, that we can glean from companies like ElevenLabs to get to better product. That
and just building on that, the other area is the fact that the role of research in what ElevenLabs does, because our research engineers are really focused on bridging this gap, right? They're not just focused on the frontier and the theoretical breakthroughs. They're actually focused on how do you engineer these solutions to work at scale in production, right? And solving the hard engineering problems that really come with this, right? Like latency, for example. And so, by combining the research focus with the product focus, we really think that we're able to keep pushing the boundary forward here, right? And making sure that these things work at scale in the enterprise.
Yeah, that point on latency, I mean, in the Scribe v2, I think you're down to 150 milliseconds for transcription latency, which is the intake, right? Like, everything gets transcribed before it goes to the model. So like, that is your intake buffer, essentially. And so like, if you have this massive multi-second delay before the model can respond simply due to transcription, your human-like experience is basically dead in the water, right? So getting to these sub-second latencies that you're now at for transcription, that seems like a major breakthrough to get past the, like, it feels like a machine, on the other end. I think some of the other things around like monitoring the quality of the conversation is also extremely important, but that just first barrier to entry of latency is just massive. Like, do you see continual updates here coming that are going to continue to drive that latency down? And is that an area you guys are super focused on?
Yeah, and the latency is one thing, but it's the accuracy alongside the latency as well. Because with Scribe V2 real time, right, we're at 93.5% accuracy with that low latency, right? Which is there's companies you might have heard of called Google and OpenAI who are a few percentage points lower than that. So we're very proud to be at that point and pushing the boundary on both fronts. But yet there will be continuous improvements there because there's other advancements that come with part of that. It's just the latency, the accuracy. That's one thing, but then we do it across 90 languages, right? And then there's other pieces we're looking at. We had some term floating around, which I don't think we used in the marketing of it in the end. We were calling it negative latency. We didn't like having the word negative out there, so I think we used something else in the end. But this was the idea of predicting the next word as well in real time and then being able to use that to drive the latency down further. So that there's a lot of really, really cool innovations in there. And again, that comes from being a research first company because we have people who are just dedicated to solving these problems and making these models and making sure they're the best they can be. And we only release these things. Like we've had customers asking for a real-time transcription model for all year, right? And we've released it in November. The reason why we've waited so long was to make sure it meets that quality bar. We're only ever going to put something out there that's best in class. So that's all we're going to do. And so, fundamentally, we'll wait, we'll iterate, we'll work, we'll get it right. And then when we get it right, it will be the best it can be. And that's how we think about these things.
I've used your models in really loud conference backgrounds, like where we're doing these audio demos, right? And it's done an amazing job at filtering out all of that crappy background noise. If I cough or if I, whatever, stutter, like notes it, but it's not a core part of the conversation. Like the model accuracy has been incredible, especially in like demanding environments where there's just tons of stuff going on. You can't like a lot of these other models I've tried, you have to be in a quiet room for them to work, for example, or they do a really bad job if you stutter or cough or, whatever. So I here on the accuracy, my friend, definitely.
Well, it's probably why you guys are getting featured, or at least Maddie is on the front of Forbes as the audio oracle.
Yeah.
But I think that's a testament to the balance between your research team and your product team. We've heard that the research team is quite large and that there's this like delicate balance. Maddie spoke at some A16Z conference or something like that about how there's this constant dance between the two teams where sometimes the research team can override the product team, but then other times the product team just gets to go. So maybe you can speak about like how large this research team is. What are the inner workings of ElevenLabs of that dance?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you have this notion of research work and product work, right? And product work, like a new feature or a new like the workflows feature or something like that. That's a product feature, and it's really easy to not easy. It's not, I don't work in products, so it's wrong to say it's easy. But you can scope and you can plan and you can understand that something might be ready in Q1, it might be ready in Q2. Research work isn't like that because it's you're solving a problem that hasn't been solved before, so it's impossible to with any confidence say it will be released on a given day unless you get really quite close to the time, right? So what we've started to talk about and frame our work around is the fact that we have essentially labs, teams of folks who are focused on one tough problem, whether that's voice or whether that's the agents or whether that's the transcription. And these labs, we don't quite have 11 of them yet, but hopefully we'll at some point, are all focused on individual problems and given the freedom to go and do that. And so what that ends up having is a very flexible organization structure that is efficient, but all moving in maybe different speeds at times and doing slightly different things, but it all moves us forward in the same overall strategic direction of the voice of technology, right? And it helps us because there are so many things we do as a company. Right? On our creative platform side, we're an audio video creation platform. On the agents platform side, we're conversational AI agents for a range of use cases. We have an Audible competitor called Reader, where you can actually go and buy books and listen to them, and that's a consumer proposition. And we have our models business that we sell to via API to technology platforms. So there's so much that we do. But having these small, highly focused teams with that research layer as the foundation really helps us all move forward in that same direction under that one mission of being really the voice of technology and really reimagining how humans and technology interact with the most seamless way possible.
Garen, what do you think? Can other enterprises, non-technology companies maybe learn from this type of approach? I'm not suggesting anyone go start being a research team to build voice models, but maybe in their domains, there could be something similar.
I mean, that's how we're trying to even approach structuring our own company. What I see happening in the future is like, I've been talking to the teams about this a lot as well, which is like, at a certain point, this tooling is going to get baked into the tools you use every day as a software engineer, right? So like as you know, the tooling around distilling a small language model or building a voice model gets embedded into the packages you use every day and become part of the developer tool chain, your role and responsibility as a developer is going to extend to this sphere. But we've got a long way to go before the average software engineer can do that effectively, right? There's got to be a lot of sort of solving of hard problems that get baked into these tools, a lot of boundaries and guardrails and platforms that help you do it, right? Like, I'd say there isn't really an easy to use platform for the average software engineer yet to help them do this. Now, ElevenLabs is making it much simpler. I would say like they've got probably the best DevEx around voice models right now. But like thinking about the platform tooling required such that an engineer as part of their daily workflow is maintaining their attuned voice models, is maintaining, you know, the conversation flows that they want to see. That has to reach them in their IDE at some point. You know, it can't be this fragmented ecosystem across 5 different platforms where one I'm doing data aggregation, another I'm doing data labeling, another I'm like, you know, trying to train the model or whatever. Like, it's literally all got to hit them in their IDE at some point. And like, so I think part of the transition that I see coming at some point is, and ElevenLabs is, in my opinion, a leader here, or the SDK tooling around these platforms such that it can become part of my daily workflow inside my IDE. And that's as easy to integrate as say like the AWS SDK is for provisioning infrastructure, or Terraform is for abstracting the details of that infrastructure. You know, we need the sort of similar types of tooling that reach the developer at some point. But be interested to get your thoughts, Jack, on extending those platform capabilities into the developer toolchain.
Yeah, you know, and this is where our roots as a self-serve developer creator focused company really helps us, because that community are vocal, and you know that they want the best possible experience, and so we're focused on having that incredible developer experience such that people want to build with us, right? And you know, one of a couple of the things that we do that really show this are, you know, the ecosystem of startups that leverage our platform, because it's easy to get started, but the tools need to live in your environment. They need to be easily accessible. And to your point, it's one thing for ElevenLabs SDKs to be readily available, but then integrating all the other components can be a hell of a lot more complex. And then if you scale that up to the enterprise, right, a global enterprise trying to deploy one of the agents, you know, building the voice agent isn't the hard part. It's integrating it with the messy enterprise systems that's the hard part. You can't even assume you have many of these enterprise. You know, you can't even assume there's clean API endpoints available for everything, right? You know, my old organization that I worked at, a large bank, you know, the mainframe is still, you know, you've still got people writing COBOL code and running that, right? So there's fundamentally, there is a lot of work that needs to be done in the ecosystem to make everything consumable. To your point, I don't think we're there yet, but we at ElevenLabs are certainly having it as a guiding light of everything that we build. In fact, you know, everything you can do in the user interface, you can do via API. And in fact, there are many things that are API only, in fact, in our platform that haven't made it to the user interface yet, right? So we're very focused on that as the integration layer.
As a stopgap, I could see like the thing we're focused on, at least for enterprise, not for our own company necessarily, is managed service offerings. So like, how do we bring managed service offerings in that will just solve these problems and like take the hit on the complexity around all these various parts of the engineering process, whether that's the data integration and data labeling, setting up the RL loops, building on platforms like ElevenLabs to build and deploy the agents. Like, just take that all as a managed service and do it for the enterprise without them having to invest in it. Because like, if you think about it, like this is you can't get economies of scale if every enterprise has got to reinvent this process itself, right? It's just like what every enterprise is going to go solve this problem over. No, there's no freaking way. And like, it's also a huge opportunity for labs like yours to partner with people to start thinking about like, well, what are the managed service offerings we could bring to enterprises, and how can we scale them up so that, you know, more and more of these companies can solve these what I call the sort of interim challenges over the next 5 years before we get to the place where like you can adopt this as part of like your internal tooling. I think over the next 5 years, we're gonna have this challenge of like, there's only a handful of people in the world know how to do it. The skill sets are in super high demand. So like finding the people is super challenging. And then also mastering it and having done it in production is the key to being able to do it like in production again. And I see you have this pilot problem that none of the enterprises can seem to get beyond. If we solve that through a managed service offering, I think it's a huge opportunity. And it requires a lot of disciplines.
Absolutely right. You know, that's why we're so focused on building an ecosystem across, whether that's the developers, whether that's the consultancies, whether that's managed services, whether that's startups using us, whether that's technology platforms. We see the aim is to have ElevenLabs everywhere and to be consumable everywhere. And we are going to do that through the ecosystem. And, you know, partnerships to be able to deploy for these production grade solutions at scale. To your point, the challenges are similar across. While the specifics may be different, the thematic challenges are the same. And so, you know, having the combination of us driving the research and the product innovation alongside some expertise that has really lived it and lived the messiness that I referred to in the enterprise and knows how to make these things work at that vast scale. I think we're really seeing that start to come together, and it's something we're really focused on at the moment as a company.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we shouldn't have chosen to build a company around this, at least from a service perspective, Dorian, but going through that pain with every enterprise repeatedly is obviously extremely rewarding. We're a mission-driven company. We want to see Western enterprises succeed at scale. But what we see is a lot of companies cannot keep pace with the level of innovation that ElevenLabs or Palantir are providing. So just being able to provide that coaching, that advisory service to people, because we have used these tools, we have delivered things in production, is super valuable. But like you said, Dorian, there's just very few people that can build this stuff technically or deploy these platforms technically. Like, how do we extend that experience to more and more people? I think the best way to do it is through an ecosystem of channel partners that can grow. While you guys are focused on giving us the capability, we can make sure that capability arrives in the hands of the largest institutions in the world.
Yeah,
To clarify though, I was saying it was hard around the full enchilada, right? The whole enchilada is hard. Building on ElevenLabs is easy. You know, it's the other parts around it that are hard. It's like, how do I integrate the data? Oh man, I can have a team of like 50 engineers in each enterprise just working on Snowflake all day to try and integrate the data. We're working on Databricks or Palantir. And then you have all these governance challenges across the enterprise that have to get solved around that because their governance process is a mess. You know, it's like, it's just like this cascade of complexity that just starts arising. You start with something very simple, like, you know, I want to hold claims that meet some deductible threshold. Sounds very simple, right? Totally doable. Until you start to actually unpack these things. And then you're like, oh my God, wait a minute. Like, what did I just get myself into? But to clarify, building on ElevenLabs easy. It's all the stuff around it that's hard.
I completely agree. But going back to something you just said, Connor, around the advisory side, it's so important because, you know, I've even working in AI, it's hard to keep on top of what's happening in AI, right? And why it matters and what the impact is. So, you know, sometimes I fear for those in leadership positions in these large organizations who are trying to keep on top of this, right? And their teams who are trying to update them on this, right? And this is where, you know, I think we see the strategic importance of the advisory in this moment in time, because organizations need to understand what's happening, why it matters, and what they can do about it. And that's really where, you know, advisory firms that are able to see across and apply that strategic lens and then understand where the right capabilities are, where they should be brought from, how to integrate them, importantly, and make sure they work in production. That's of critical importance because, you know, you can't be, you know, flying blind in this space where, you know, within the same week you can go from GPT 5.1, Claude Opus, and Gemini Pro 3 all vying for the top of what's possible, right? It's really hard to cut through the noise.
Yeah, we met with a manufacturer of rail cars recently where they had seen something that looked impressive from like a chat experience perspective. But if you know deeply how this stuff works, and then you know that there's a voice component or a voice capability from ElevenLabs, you know that which one you want. But if you don't, if you're not, just deep inside the technology, interacting with technology providers like ElevenLabs, you don't know potentially which one is better, which one is worth investing in. And that matters because leaders need to be making practical decisions. But with technology moving this fast, it's best to like phone a friend, phone up an advisor that is working or partnered with technology companies so that you can pick the right solutions. I want to pivot here. You had mentioned that you guys are investing in channel partners, and obviously there's huge backing for the developer experience being considered and improved. What else are you guys doing to like drive the ecosystem around ElevenLabs? We know there was the summit recently in San Francisco. There's another event. What else is going on to drive the developer community?
There are so many elements because the developer community is one thing, but one other piece that's really impactful for us is the creator economy as well. Because we have over 10,000 voices available on our platform. What's really interesting is many of those are actually created by voice actors, right? And people think I've made up this number because it's just too convenient, but we've now paid over $11 million of payments to these voice actors on the platform, right? Who are able to actually earn from there's one particular person who's made a reasonable amount of money here because his voice has been chosen to be the voice of a brand, and it can be incredibly impactful. And in fact 50% of global usage on the platform is actually coming from those voice actor shared voices, right? So we've got that piece, and then the developer piece. I think we kind of want to do something similar and be able to bring the power of what developers are building on the platform and showcase that more broadly. We've been doing that at the summit, which we're also hosting in London in February. We're doing a very similar event for those who are in Europe, where we can actually showcase the innovative capabilities that are being built using our platform, voice first. So fundamentally, I think there's the showcasing of the capabilities. There's the creator economy as well, and then the final piece that I also want to highlight is the impact side as well. Because one of the things we're incredibly proud of, and we were able to also showcase at the summit in quite a meaningful way, is giving voices back to those who have lost them. And we partner with many impact organizations and charities to be able to work with those who have ALS, who have had cancer, and able to give them their voice back through technology. And it's something, in fact, we'll be sharing more of that more broadly in the new year, and it's something that's really important to all of us at ElevenLabs.
That is super interesting. I've never heard that before either, like that you guys were actually working on that. Also, I'd never, like, as a software engineer, I never even think about the creator economy that goes beyond this. And like thinking about that piece could actually be bigger than the software developer community at the end of the day, like especially if you're talking about voice. And like, how does it get integrated though? So I'm wondering, like, okay, if I become the spokesperson of a brand and I sell my voice, I guess somehow there's a licensing component to that because I'm not familiar with how that works on the platform. And then how does it go into, like, let's say I want to incorporate it into video production. Is there an easy way to like bring the voice component into a video production, or how do you see that process working in the future?
Well, now you can create a video in ElevenLabs because as of 3 weeks ago, we launched image and video generation models in our creative studio into our ElevenLabs studio. So you can now you can generate video with, let's say, VO3 or Sora 2 and enhance that with ElevenLabs audio. And, we now have this one-stop shop studio where all of the capabilities come together. So you can generate music using 11 Music and score the video. You can use Scribe Real Time to transcribe the video immediately and then switch the voices over. So, after you finish recording this, if you don't like my voice, you can export it straight into ElevenLabs and swap my voice out for Dorian's, and it'll sound much better. And they're the kind of things you'll now be able to do using our studio. Because before, people had to kind of export things out, bring them into another platform, stitch them together, upload them back. Now it's all available in one platform, and we're going to continue investing in that.
So you're telling me we can get a Code and Connor episode out every 20 minutes, all AI generated?
Yeah.
Just flood YouTube with content.
Are you also managing the rights management in there as well? So like, I think it sounded like you are making payments to voice actors.
We are. And one of the other really interesting things that we announced recently is our Iconic Voices marketplace as well, which is the licensed voices of famous individuals like Michael Caine was a launch partner for this, where brands will be able to apply for the ability to license that voice through our marketplace. And it will be an ElevenLabs generated clone of that voice that's been approved. And we're able to now broaden the exposure and awareness and make these iconic voices available more broadly. So we see that as a growing area for us as well, particularly in the media and entertainment sectors, advertising, marketing. That whole space will be a very growing area for this licensing and
well, more people writing about this. All I read about every day is how AI is going to be doom and gloom for every artist out there and every creator. Like, this seems like a huge boon for them, like, can you imagine especially if you're like a smaller voice actor, now you have a revenue stream coming in, or if you are one of these major voice actors, now you have this whole new revenue stream that can come in. Like, more people need to write about this. This is awesome. Like, you're actually solving a really complicated challenge.
We're focused on seamless creation, right? Seamless communication with the agents and seamless creation with the creative platform. And I think you're going to see individuals who create and have a, whether that's their voice, whether that's the video they're creating, whether that's the music they're creating. We're a tool that will help them create better and faster at scale. And that's where I think we're going to see the focus over the next year or two.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the doom and gloom, Dorian, the rise of deep fakes, synthetic voice misuse. This seems like a pragmatic, rather than just complaining about it or regulating out of existence, let's make an economy out of it, where or new revenue streams for people that can monetize their own voice. How is ElevenLabs staying ahead, though, of the regulatory and ethical curve? Like, and I'm sure if you could touch on Europe too here, like in the US, it kind of just feels like it's the wild freaking West. But like, I'm sure the Eurozone is more focused on regulation. But speak maybe to both.
Yeah. Fundamentally, on the area that we're focused on, we are trying to take a very proactive approach when it comes to AI safety and security. We were very early in implementing what we call an AI audio classifier, whereby you can take any piece of audio, music, sound effect, voice, whatever it is, upload it into ElevenLabs, and we'll tell you whether or not it was generated on the ElevenLabs platform, right? So, fundamentally putting those guardrails in there, and then we've done something similar with our voice clones, with the notion of a voice capture and being able to actually authenticate and state very clearly that you have the rights to put that voice on the platform. We've taken a very proactive stance to get ahead of these issues because, mainly we don't need the noise, but primarily we want to also be able to make sure that the solution is doing right by people. And so we have a very large and focused AI safety organization who are engaging at all levels with governments globally. We are seeing obviously divergent regulatory approaches from region to region. My personal view is that the more unified we are on this as the major economies that can actually get some standard that we can agree to and can help drive the industry forward. Because fundamentally, tinkering around the edges isn't really going to help here because the AI genie is out of the bottle. It's not going to go back in. And so now we need to think about how we actually enable it to thrive within a regulatory construct that, number one, protects people, but also helps the economy grow. And so, I think the more alignment we can have across the EU and across the US and other markets will be really important. But at ElevenLabs, we're focused on a proactive stance here and making sure that we're doing everything we can in the most ethical way and making sure it's is the safest it can be.
And in the current state of affairs in the U.S., I've heard it called the patchwork of regulations because you have states enacting their own legislation around this. California seems to be one of the most aggressive, which is where I am. Where I think they famously tried to have some bill where it was like banning deep fakes, and Gavin Newsom was very upset at companies that were allowing people to produce deep fakes of politicians. If we get a federal standard, like let's just say we could get to a single federal standard and then this sort of pressure goes away, how much of an unlock is that for you? Like I'm trying to gauge what is the regulatory pressure component here to your business and how much is it holding you back? And if you could remove some of it, how much faster could you go?
In any walk of life and in any economic environment, having that regulatory consistency, I think, helps give you the ability to plan and actually execute and go in a particular direction. I think it certainly would be an unlock. I wouldn't say it wouldn't be, but I think we are also operating in the environment we're in, and so we're focused on making it work in the environment we are, and being very successful at that, right? So I think the more alignment and the more the more focus on doing this from the governments will be important, but we can't count on that.
Certainly is more predictable from the investor perspective, I guess. If we had one standard, we know that tomorrow California isn't going to tank your business, but yeah, I hear you for sure.
What's on the roadmap? I mean, we're getting these announcements, right? That you guys have put out, obviously, on the heels of the first summit. But what's next that we haven't covered so far?
If you look further out, I think there's probably going to be 3 key themes that will really underpin the future of audio AI, right? I think firstly, we're going to see audio across all information and content, right? It's going to be the new standard. It's going to be available by default, and it's going to be immersive, and it's going to be the most engaging it can be. I think the second piece, and it goes back to our focus as a company, which is probably born out of us being a European company at heart, is being truly global by design. I think voice, language, dialect, all of that will be built into the core of the technology, really. And I think multilingual communication won't become an add-on, it will be the standard, right? And we're already starting to see that with some of the real-time translation features that are coming out there on AirPods and things like this. But I think you're going to see a real blurring of the communication barriers, and you're going to see a lot of that kind of become truly global by nature. And then the third piece, and it's kind of our mission at this point, is for voice to be the default interface for technology. I think all of our interactions with the technology around us, it won't be so much about tapping on this, it will be voice driven, and it will be a shift from static to interactive across all of the touch points. I think you'll see, people have been experimenting with Alexas in the home and things like this over time, but I think it's truly going to happen and enabled by LLMs, enabled by low latency interactions, and enabled by the hardware to make sure that it's the true standard for voice interaction.
Well, to make this real, tool calling sucks today. Tool calling is super inefficient. Some of the models suck at it, like the Gemini family of models can't even do it effectively. And it's because of the way tool calling actually works behind the scenes. And it's pretty much an out-of-sample distribution problem, meaning like these LLMs have not been trained on massive amounts of tool calling data. They've been trained on massive amounts of text over the internet. They actually can write the tool calls as code more efficiently. They can do the tool calling itself. And so what does that mean? Well, it means there might be other dialects that the models use to sort of perform these operations that are more symbolic in nature than they are today currently, or they become more expressive as code in nature, in the future. There'll be it's not just like human to human multilingual exchanges, which will happen for sure. It's also like, in my opinion, there's going to be this, well, how do we more effectively express a program the model wants to execute, or communicate between models than we do today? Because tool calling ain't going to make it. Like, I'll make that prediction right now. Within a year or two, the way we do tool calling today will be effectively dead. It's a dead end, in my opinion. You touched on it earlier as far as like, okay, you're using voice in med device. We're using voice effectively, to run agents on the phone and do call center operations, perhaps running enterprise workflows and back office functions, where it isn't typically in use today. Like, what does that look like in terms of devices? And does it change the form factor? Like, everything today is a keyboard and a screen. Everything today is like tap on the phone, uh, does this change the hardware game? Does it change the devices we need in order to make this real? Like, do we have the right form factors today to power that economy?
It's a really interesting. I think part of it's the hardware, but part of it's also the software as well. Because I think fundamentally everything being designed around a kind of point and click interface at the moment isn't necessarily the optimal point for the way that these technologies are going to be built in the future. I think interestingly, Apple have been pushing forward on this with the iPad in many ways, and their kind of resistance to having a cursor on there, which I found so interesting that last year they actually succumbed and made it feel more like a traditional computer. When I think actually the hardware and the software is going to need to go the other way, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what OpenAI are cooking up with Johnny Ive, because I really do think that the form factor, we haven't quite found it yet. I mean, the various things like humane pins and things like this that were tried over the recent years were not it. But something will need to change on the form factor side, and fundamentally, the way software is designed will need to become a little more experiential. Whether generative interfaces come into that and play some part remains to be seen. But I think there will be some shift in how we design the hardware, and we actually design the software that will be living on that as well.
What about, I've seen this interesting trend among developers who use AI a lot. And I don't mean like the average chat conversation. They're processing large amounts of data with it. They're running massive workloads. If we look at voice becoming the primary sort of interface for software, you start to see this massive uptick in demand across like these LLMs and models that are going to be required to do it. The people I know doing these massive workloads are actually getting their own GPUs and like running small language models locally to get rid of this demand bottleneck we have. Do you see anything in the interim that's like a short-term stopgap to help bridge the capacity constraints that are maybe there's like at-home devices that enable some of this, or in-office devices and racks that people put up? But like, what are your thoughts on the capacity problem, and does that become a fundamental bottleneck in adoption? And like, if we're talking consumer scale here, like if we're talking AI on every device and new form factors, like, what do you see the bottlenecks are, and how do we get beyond them?
I think you're right. And what's really interesting is these smaller models, these more efficient models, operating at low latency can actually do a pretty good job as it is. I mean, we've been in ElevenLabs, we've been experimenting with ElevenLabs hosted models rather than allowing you to, you can still go and use OpenAI, you can still go and use Claude, whatever it is. But we've been having a few open source models like GLM 4.5 Air, for example, which is really performant at many of the use cases you might want, and then hand off to a more advanced model when you go deeper in the flow for actually doing a bit more complex thinking. So I think you're right. I think that combination of smaller models, either self-hosted or locally hosted, orchestrated with the bigger full fat models for more complex reasoning, I think will likely be the if not the optimal solution, at least the stopgap, until local processing becomes efficient enough to be able to handle something at the scale. The challenge is always going to be, however, though, that and one problem I have with the notion that over time all the costs will come down because the efficiency will improve. The frontier is also going to keep moving, right? And that's going to be the challenge, because people will always want the latest and greatest. GPT 5.1 is here. You don't want to use GPT-3 anymore, right? it's probably very efficient to use it locally at this point, but you don't. You want to use GPT-5.1. And so as the frontier moves, how do you balance that demand is going to be an interesting question as well.
It's interesting to see if the frontier gets blocked by lack of electricity, though. You never know. They reach a natural scaling limit there that at that point we're stuck for a period of years while we get nat gas and nuclear plants up and running. But we'll see how much the energy becomes the bottleneck ultimately to this whole endeavor. But yeah, I think you're right, though. I think some combination of that in the interim sounds right to me. It seems to be the way people are naturally solving it as well. Just like if they're capacity constrained, that's what they're doing. They're just like, I'll just get my own damn GPUs. I'll use smaller models. I'll run it however, by hook or by crook. I'm going to make this workload, manifest into reality.
Well, thanks, guys. Today we covered ElevenLabs' recent partnerships and the evolution of voice-first AI agents, the DevEx of their platforms, and the various platforms and capabilities that ElevenLabs is providing, the movement past pilot and the benefits of the research teams inside ElevenLabs' four walls, a new economy around voice, giving voice back to people who have lost them, overcoming regulatory pressures and what that means for ElevenLabs and what is coming in the future. Jack, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the pod. Where can people find out more about you and ElevenLabs?
Thanks for having me. It's been great. You can find out more about us at ElevenLabs.io. We have many of our agents baked into the website on our documentation, on our sales page, etc. So you can actually try it out and engage with it. You could sign up for a reasonable amount and play around with the solution and learn more about it. But ElevenLabs.io.
Well, guys, future episodes coming, more and more guests of partners, customers, content creators, Palantir, other tech companies, you name it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.